So it's 5 days to the Passover. And Jesus is making his way to the city. The crowds go out to meet him, confirming the religious leaders' worst fears. Branches are cut down and waved overhead like banners. "Hosanna," they shout. "Lord, save us." The moments that the gospel describes and the land of Palestine in Jesus' day, this was a dangerous and confusing time and place for the Hebrew people. They had lived under Roman rule for a long time. They're trying to be faithful. They want to believe. But the people have been waiting for God's promises to be revealed, and the old habits and rituals just don't feel like they're working anymore. People are asking questions that the religious experts can't easily answer. This new thing, this solitary teacher from Galilee with his small group of students, they're causing a commotion wherever they go. They're raising questions. They are encouraging people. Now, when times are tough, new things are very attractive. And Jesus is offering something new. People are being healed. Old ideas are being challenged. A man has been called back from death, for heaven's sake. When you can see these things happening, who cares about solid, well-rehearsed religious answers? Maybe this is God's Messiah, finally coming to set us free in the very season that the people celebrated God's most famous act of liberation. It's no wonder people are excited, for the thought has crossed their minds that God has finally sent someone to save them again. No wonder the leaders are worried. Those who controlled the right way to worship, those who help enforce the rules around the ways in which people live out their faith, those people cannot seem to understand, nor can they control this sudden energetic sense of hope that surrounds Jesus as he rides into town like a conquering hero. The people want miracles, and Jesus delivers. The rules of faith, such as they had been practiced, seem frustrating and pointless when the blind are being given their sight and the dead are brought back to life. These signs and wonders cannot be explained by the people who have been in charge of explaining God. And when hope overflows into the streets, when the people's cheers reach the offices of the powerful rulers, something is bound to happen. But today we remember, with the story of this Palm Parade, we remember the feeling that must have swept over the crowds as Jesus went about the countryside, as Jesus finally made it to Jerusalem. And we remember Jesus, who walked and talked, who taught and worshiped as though God was standing next to him. We remember Jesus, who referred to God as parent and partner, who talks to God and about God as though God were his oldest, dearest friend. We remember Jesus, who knows the rules of faith, but who only seems to follow the ones that show God's mercy or convey God's amazing love. And so he is always at odds with the rule keepers. We remember Jesus, who brings that feeling of hope, the excitement of knowing that God is doing wonderful things among us. Because that hope is at the very root of faith. Hope is what we want most of all when things are uncertain. And when hope is offered in the simplicity of compassion and loving kindness, when hope emerges among a people who are considerate and mindful of the way God still works, then the doubters and the powerful of the world still get nervous. Just as in Jesus' day, there are powerful people trying to detour hopefulness and wonder. In Jesus' time, they simply plotted to kill the source of hope. In our time, they offer alternatives, attractive alternatives, programs to follow, products to buy, rules to obey that they say will satisfy us. But nothing is quite the same as the sight of Jesus riding into town with the promise of God's presence with him, plain on his face, plain in his words and actions. No product, no program, no promise of rule keeping can compete with Jesus. And on that day, everybody knew it. Even the ones who were sure of their authority, who say in frustration, look, the whole world has gone after him. Prophets are rarely trusted in their own time. Jesus went as far as to declare that a prophet has no honor in their hometown. And that's because prophets are not capable of soft peddling their particular message. The words of a prophet are often stark and against the grain. A pastor or a preacher may occasionally speak the truth in love, but a prophet can only speak the truth. Without regard for personal feelings, without thinking about who might be inconvenienced. The prophet's task is singular and thankless. A prophet doesn't always offer solutions, but almost always brings a reminder of consequence. So it was with Isaiah, whose words were hard to hear in his own time. His teacher's tongue offered the faithful a way to see light at the end of the tunnel of exile. But his hopeful message was not always well received. For there are always those who imagine that any signs of hope are nothing more than fantasy. Realists, they call themselves, people who are determined to be self-reliant, to deal only with what is in front of them when the chips are down. People who make their own way through difficult circumstances, who trust only to experience, not to insight or imagination, heaven forbid. There are others of a similar mind who would advise us to make our own hope. See, to trust in God is to abandon individual initiative, they say. So we should fight to fit in. Take power and privilege where it is offered. Forget the ancient promises. live in the present with a vengeance. These law of the jungle advocates have no time for the prophet's plaintive reminders. They disparage dependence on divine assistance. They have made pragmatism their religion. They make gods of themselves. The only past that matters is likewise their personal experience. Collective memories are quaint but inconvenient. They have no value to those whose goal is self-determination, self-preservation, and self-promotion. That's why Isaiah was hard to hear. Isaiah, who teaches the people about their past and promises them a future that is in God's hands. The past in which God features as a distant hero, fire on the top of a mountain, thunder in the clouds. And yet the prophet trusts in that story. He trusts God implicitly in spite of the evidence in front of him against such faith. And we are bold to take Isaiah's words and apply them to Jesus and to Jesus' situation. For the circumstances are similar. In Jesus' time as well as Isaiah's time, hope in God seems to produce only despair. The idea of a divine rescue is a faded and fading memory, a near forgotten dream. The world is having its way with God's beloved people, and that is that. And into this time of bare hopelessness comes Jesus. And his teaching tongue presents a new perspective of that ancient hope, delivered against the world's evidence. And like the prophet before him, we are willing to declare that in Jesus we have seen evidence of divine mercy and divine presence. There's something about him that excites us, something new, something hopeful. Surely God is in the midst of doing something wonderful. Even a guilty verdict in the trial that we know is coming cannot shake our certainty. For God is doing something wonderful, something we don't yet understand, something that revives our hope, even in the face of death and despair, even against the grain of the evidence in front of us. Could there be a better example to have before us at a time like this?